that if this thing happens, how, what kind of impact would be seen around. So that is how we will try to see that how social impact assessment is taken up. So as a researcher, I simply cannot afford to just go to the field, record my findings and submit the report to the project. I have to go for a gram panchayat sabha. I need to show my findings, the result, why I had such kind of findings. I need to discuss my report before submitting it to the government. I have to talk it out with them, because it is them who will be affected as a population, as a community, and I cannot write anything and just submit it to them. So that has to be validated by the people who are being affected by it. So they will try to audit the entire thing. No, 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 the thing that you are talking about, maybe you have missed out on this reason, or the accuracy of this particular data doesn't seem to be correct to us, because these are the things, these are the ways. So every time you have to take up their perspective, and it is actually a very tough job, because in every village there will be have you'll be having multiple groups with different conflicts between them, and the way you try to acquire validation from them, it's a difficult process, but that's how we tend to achieve communicative validation whenever we talk about these kind of studies. The third could be argumentative validation. This form of validation is established through presentation of the findings in such a way that conclusion can be followed and tested. Every time you come up with an argument, I am in a position where I can empirically test it, and I can just arrive at a conclusion. That is argumentative validation. Then the fourth one is ecological validation. If a study is carried out in the natural environment of the subjects using suitable methods, then we say ecological validity has been achieved. For example, I will say that I'm trying to talk about uh, the Dongriya Kandhas who actually hail from these Niyamgiri hills. I would go to them. I would try to study the way the community practices are, the way they, respond to particular situations. That is one way of doing it. It is like studying them in their natural environment, which mostly uh, ethnographers take up. But if I say that, okay, there is a group of Niyamgiri, Dongriya, Kandhas who are, migrated from that place and who are residing in some of the slums in Bhubaneswar, I would say that, instead of going to those hills, those tricky areas, let me conduct their interview in the slums. So maybe the kind of ecological validity might not be reflected in my study. It again depends on the study, what kind of study I am talking about. If I am talking about migration, and I am doing it in the slums, so perhaps it would have the perfect ecological validity. But if I am talking about their lifestyle, their practices, and I am talking to them in the slums, then it might lack ecological validity. Next is validity in ethnographic research. I told you, most of the classics that we have read, it's about these ethnographic account of some of the famous social anthropologists, be it Malinowski's Troby and Islanders, be it M.N. Srinivas's, study on the Rampura village. No, they are. These are some of the most of the anthropologists, the classics that we have encountered. It is about ethnography, and in ethnography, what happens as a researcher, you are picking up multiple methods of data collection. You are trying to be there, make them uh, you know be a part of the member of the group, stay there for quite a considerable number of period, try to understand them. Sometimes you are taking up a survey, sometimes you are interviewing them, sometimes you have picked up a case study of something, or sometimes you are just observing them, sometimes you are doing an FDG. So you can engage with multiple methods when it comes to ethnography. And ethnography has this history of creating extensively rich data. So, according to Wolcott, he says that researchers should refrain from talking, listen, and listen as much as possible. In ethnography, it's not a survey method that you just ask somebody in terms of yes and no, or you are trying to give them a scale of ask them to rate things on a scale of 5 or 10. In ethnography, you talk very less. You just allow the person to speak, and just allow them to go with the flow, and you just listen and listen, and you try to befriend them. And the most important thing in ethnography is the respondent should consider you as a friend. They should have this you should have this ability to make them feel comfortable with you, and you are able to strike your rapport to such an extent where they can confide in you, they can trust you. So mostly when we talk about validity, we ask the researcher to talk less, because when you talk more, there is this possibility that you will end up leading the respondent, that okay, maybe these are the probable answers perhaps you are trying to talk about, or is it the thing. So you are, when you speak more, you will end up leading them. You will try to lead them with certain questions where perhaps they might think of pleasing you, or giving you the response that you actually wanted to have. So that's the reason why it is asked that you listen more and you talk less. Produce notes that are as exact as possible. When we take up qualitative studies in detail, you will see that there is this thing called field notes. You tend to maintain a field diary, and in a field diary you are taking note of everything. It's not just what the person is talking about, you are taking a note of his or her facial gestures, of the kind of unspoken words, but the way you are trying to judge the person or read the person's mind. There is a complete note of everything. What was your feeling, the way you felt that you are being perceived by the respondent. So you, once you are out of the field, you come back home, or the abode where you are put in while conducting the study, while conducting that ethnography, you have to just use your memory and write your field diary immediately. You can have just simple notes, and you can just help yourself, and you need to note down your field diary every day. So they say that you need to begin to write as early as possible, because if you say that okay, I remember everything, I have jotted down little bit of things, maybe I'll write it in after a week or two, after 2 3 days. But after 2 3 days you might end up forgetting the facial gestures. You might forget those unspoken words, but that was a major chunk of your interview. So when you are conducting an interview, it is not just the spoken words that you are taking into consideration. You take into consideration everything: the unspoken words, the facial gestures, the body language, everything. So you need to write as early as possible. write in such a way that the researchers should make their own, readers should make their own inferences. You shouldn't try to come up with certain judgments that this is how the person behaved. I thought that the person had this kind of a attitude towards me. You will not lead the readers into anything. You will just explain that I when I put forth this question, I saw this kind of an expression on his face. There was a slight frown on his face, and then this person started narrating this thing. You will simply avoid all kinds of adjectives and all kinds of judgmental words, value loaded words that would describe the person, the community, or the scenario. You will just describe the entire interview process, including the facial expressions, the body language, the way you are saying, the way that person was replying. That's it. It is up to the reader to draw their own conclusion. You will not have to arrive at an inference. The inference would be drawn by the readers themselves. And most important, the report that you are submitting, it has to be complete. The researchers should seek feedback for his or her findings and presentations at the end of the thing. One of the major challenges that sociologists faced, and the basic difference between an anthropologist and a sociologist in that, in those times, the classical times that I'm talking about, was that the anthropologist was studying an alien society, a society that he was not a member to it, and the societies that he or she was studying was mostly a non-literate society. So the kind of communicative validation that I was talking about, it never came from them. But with sociologists, you know you are talking about a literate society, and mostly sociologists study their own society. So that's the reason why these validations are more important. It is very, you cannot get away with writing something or presenting something without seeking their validation, without seeking the feedback on your findings and your presentations. That's the basic difference. So this is how you can maintain validity in ethnographic research. It is not just that validity can be maintained only in quantitative studies. In qualitative studies, this is the way how you maintain validity. Then there are other ways of maintaining validity. So here I have quoted some of the prominent scholars who have talked on this theme of validity. You have Miles and Huberman, who suggest that some tactics for tasting, although not direct forms of validity, but there are similar forms of validity. You cannot have those direct forms, but you can just have certain similar arrangements so that the kind of validity that we are seeking, it can be approached. You have scholars like Lincoln and Guba, who propose for an integrated effort, the way quantitative and qualitative forms can be integrated, so that validity can be sought for both qualitative and quantitative studies. For Lamneck, validation for qualitative research is based on the following grounds. First, data are closer to research field than in quantitative research, because in quantitative research you tend to squeeze the data in a particular way. You tend to organize the data in terms of numbers, in terms of tables. But in qualitative research, when you read the report, it's like you have experienced that thing. It is something you have always faced, or you have been a part of the field. You make the reader feel as if the reader was himself or herself on the field. That's the basic difference. So that's how data is more closer to the field in qualitative research. The collection of data is not determined by directives. You just go with the flow. You do not have this. prescriptive directives that this is how I should go. Number one question has to be followed by number two. I need these kind of numbers to be put in. You are just you see the comfort level of the respondent. Okay, that respondent is comfortable with this thing, or that respondent is not comfortable with this thing. Let me skip it, or let me come back to this particular question after some time when I have spent ample amount of time with the respondent, and maybe I'm in a situation where the respondent has been able to trust me. So then only you can put those dicey tricky questions. So you it's not determined by any kind of directives. Then data is, as I told you earlier, data is more closer to reality than in quantitative research. The opinions and the views of the researched of the respondents are taken into consideration. If you remember in the very first class when I was discussing with you the basic difference between a positivist and an anti-positivist position, I was talking to you about the point of view, the POVs. In quantitative research, you take up the point of view of an observer. You are just a distant observer, you are indifferent, you are just observing and reporting. But when it comes to this anti-positivist position, you become one with the respondent. You be a part of that particular community for the time being. You cry with them, you feel as if their suffering is a part of your very own life. So that's the reason when the basic difference we had in the previous position, where there was a gap between the knower and the known, the kind of authority or hierarchy that existed in this, that mostly the scientific domains practiced, that you treat the respondents as an object of inquiry. That doesn't happen in a qualitative study. You try to become a voice for them. You tend to validate, you say that, this is how I have framed my question. Is it the right way? Or is there any problem that has not been, addressed in this particular questionnaire? Would you like to add something to it? So you tend to seek their validation at every step of research. This is how I have analyzed. Perhaps they will not understand your the terminology, the idioms of research, but you can try to speak in a common language to them and seek their opinion, their views. So that's how, when we talk about validation, it is very important to seek the views and opinions of the respondents. The methods are open and they are much more flexible than in quantitative research. As I told you earlier, there is a communicative basis that is not available in quantitative research. You tend to maintain that communicative validation that we discussed earlier, because it is like you are a representative of that community. You are trying to give a voice to them. So you see things from their point of view. If you remember, I was talking about Weberian perspective of intersubjectivity, where you tend to use your own subjectivity to understand their subjectivity, stepping into their shoes and see how the world looks like from their point of view rather than from your own position. That's the basic difference. And there is a successive expansion of data that is possible. It is said that a clear description of procedures of data collection and interpretation, the presentation of relevant materials, reproduction of transcripts, field notes, and even emphasis on replication is significant, according to Matt. So it's not only that you are describing the entire data collection procedure, you are keeping the readers informed about every position, rather than directing the readers that this is your conclusion, you think that this community has this kind of a thing. Don't try to use your own judgments and impose it on the readers. You have to keep everything open ended. You have to, so one of the best way to you know conduct, to talk about validity in qualitative research is to be transparent. I am being transparent about the methods. I am being transparent about my analysis. I am being transparent when it comes to my field notes, my transcripts, everything is open. It's like an open book. So it is up to the reader and the audience to judge the community, or, and of course, judge my own research. But I will not use any kind of value loaded, any kind of, what you say, prejudiced kind of language, or any kind of judgmental terminologies to assess this particular thing. So that's about validity of an instrument. I will take up reliability, because validity and reliability are like the two sides of the same coin. We cannot talk about validity unless we talk about reliability. So maybe we can take 10 to 15 minutes break, and in the next after the break we will take up reliability.
Okay, ma'am.
Welcome back. I'll be sharing the slides on reliability right now. Please prompt me if you're able to see it or not. I hope you're able to see it.
It's visual.
Okay. So, validity was about, accuracy or choosing the right kind of an instrument. So, reliability is the extent to which a measure, procedure, or instrument provides the same result on a repeated trial. I have put here two examples. Say you are using a weighing machine to record your body weight, and every time the scale gives a constant, you know, value. Now, the scale in the second example, the scale shows 5 kilo less than your actual weight. The instrument every time give consistently the same readings. Got both the examples? In the first case, your body weight is being recorded, and every time the scale gives the correct value. In the second case, the body weight, that is your actual weight, is actually not reflected in the weighing machine. The weighing machine gives an incorrect reading, but every time it gives the same incorrect reading. Now tell me, in case 1, is it a case of reliability? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Case 2,
No, ma'am.
is it a case of reliability? Yes or no?
Ma'am.
I'm not able to hear you. Yes or no?
No, ma'am.
No. Okay. It is actually yes in both the cases. Because reliability is about consistency of your result. It has nothing to do with accuracy. When you talk about accuracy, we are talking about validity. But remember one thing, without validity, reliability is of no use. Both are interdependent in that way. Got my point? Validity is about accuracy and reliability is about consistency. So even if you are getting consistently the wrong reading, it is reliable but not valid. Okay. So reliability is equivalent to consistency. It measures the quality of indicators and instruments. So the question that it asks, does the instrument or indicator produce consistent results? As in validity, you are putting forth the question that does the instrument measure what it is supposed to measure? Here you are asking, does the indicator produce consistent results or not? Is the instrument free of bias associated with the researchers, the subject, or the research conditions? That is also another related question. Is the instrument free of bias associated with the researchers, subject, or the research condition? That often happens with social sciences. So, when we talk about reliability, we tend to see whether different researchers who are pursuing the same case and perhaps in the same field, they can come up with different data or the same data. Is the consistency being maintained all through? So if it is being maintained, we can say that the instrument is free of bias and the researcher who is actually conducting the research is also free of bias. So like validity, reliability also has internal and external aspects. Internal means consistency of results within the site. External validity refers to consistency and replicability of data across sites. Across sites means across different fields. It's not just about one particular field. Now, talking about quantitative research, as I told you, reliability is about consistency, and one thrives to get consistently the same result even if it records the wrong result. It tends to pass as reliable but not valid. That's the basic difference between reliability and validity. And without validity, reliability is of absolutely no use. It is completely useless. You have to keep this thing in mind. So there are three types of reliability: stability reliability. It relates to reliability across time. Here, the major question is whether a measure produces reliable findings if it is employed at different points of time. Suppose, as I was talking to you about longitudinal study in the beginning of the class, you were, picking up a study which you are conducting for 5 consecutive years. And here you will see the major question is that you get the same finding for 5 different times at the different points of time for which you have conducted the research. That would be called stability reliability. And mostly, these three forms of reliability are sought in quantitative studies. Second is representative reliability. It relates to reliability across groups of subject. Here the question is whether if the measure is reliable if employed in groups other than original group of subjects. So the first is across time. The second is across groups of subject. So here you will see whether the tool is reliable if employed in groups other than the original group. I have administered a particular instrument, the questionnaire, with a particular community. Now I will use the same questionnaire with another group and I will try to see if I am getting the same result. Or I may use, as in the previous case, I would be using the same questionnaire with the same group, maybe at different points of time, or with different groups at two different points of time. That will be about stability reliability. But when it is about different groups, it is about representative reliability. Now the third one is equivalence reliability. It relates to reliability across indicators and to multiple indicators in operationalization process. So now I used one particular indicator to assess, say, uh, a particular thing. Say, I will see that, okay, I'm trying to see the relationship between education and income. So when I'm trying to, assess the idea of education, I will try to see if I'm able to use different indicators and get at the same result. So when I talk about education, is it about just your the way you write, your examination performance, or is it about your class performance, the way you are participating, your class participation, or is it about trying to assess you through different modes of evaluation, say how your creativity works. So I can have different indicators and yet I will get the same result for every different indicator. So that will be called equivalence reliability. So these are the three different types of reliability that we tend to talk about when we try to take up quantitative studies. Now, how you test the reliability of a particular instrument. We have studied how we tested validity of an instrument different ways. If you remember, we were talking about empirical validity, theoretical validity, where we talked about face validity, content validity. So, similarly, we'll be talking about different methods for seeing whether this particular instrument can be reliable or not. The first one is the test retest method. What happens here? You will choose the same subjects, they are tasted and retested with the same instrument. So, if the same results are obtained, then the instrument is reliable. So, you have a particular group, you are administering that particular group with a questionnaire or say an interview schedule, and you are testing them with the same instrument, and again going for the second time you are also going for the similar instrument, and you compare the results. Okay, when I in the first trial these were the result, and in the second trial these were the result. So that is called the test retest method, where you expose the respondents to the same instrument for more than one times. Second is split half method. What is the split half method? Responses to the items of an instrument are divided into two groups, and the scores are correlated. For example, there is a relationship between question 2 and say question 8. If you have given a wrong answer for question 2, perhaps the same question would be put forth in a different way or in a related way, so that the researcher can assess whether you have given the appropriate answer or not. So that is the split half method, where we tend to find some correlation between say certain even questions. We make two categories of even and odd, and every question is correlated with some other question. Suppose question number 2 is correlated with question number 8, and question number 8 is again 2 and 8 both are correlated with question number 10. So that is how you will see that the type and degree of correlation would indicate to you about the degree of reliability. So the stronger the correlation, you will tend to quantitatively, statistically try to analyze whether the correlation between these different questions are strong or weak. So the stronger the correlation is, the stronger would be the degree of reliability. That is called split half method. Third, inter-item test and inter-scale test. Inter-item correlations or in item scale correlations indicate again the degree of reliability. So it is similar to this test retest method. Sorry, this split half method. So instead of using questions, different questions as correlated to each other, you tend to have a correlation between items. That item could be something which is thematically arranged, or which is some kind in some way sequentially arranged. It depends on the researcher, but every item would have a corresponding correlation with some other item, and like the second one, it is completely similar to the second one, where you tend to find the correlation, and that will give you the degree of reliability between those items. Then the fourth one is alternate form reliability. What is alternate form reliability? It is tested by administering two similar instruments in one session, and is assessed by the degree of correlation between the scores of the two groups. So you will use two similar instruments. It will not be completely same, but it will be similar in every way. There would be some rephrasing done, or some kind of new situations would be introduced, but more or less the spirit and the ethos of the questionnaire would remain the same. And they will try to assess the correlation of the scores of the groups uh, that was used through two different instruments, and then try to see that whether this answer is reliable or not, the instrument is reliable or not. So instruments are always tested before being put to use. So as I told you earlier, reliability is of no use without validity. So before seeking reliability, you have to see whether the instrument is valid or not. As I told you earlier, if a student weighs 60 kilo every time he or she steps on a scale, yet his actual weight is 70 kilo. So I have told you earlier that this is a case of inappropriate validity, because it doesn't show that that instrument is not giving the accurate reading. So where you can say that every time you do it, it gives the same result. Your 70 kilo, your weight is 70 kilo, and your weighing machine always shows that you are 60 kilo. So you do it 10 times, you try to measure your weight, and you keep the notings and you record it, and every time it shows 70 kilos. So as I told you, it will be a case of reliability without validity, because your instrument is not showing the accurate result. So as I told you earlier, without validity, reliability is useless. So here you can say the readings are reliable, but they are not valid, they lack validity. So that's the reason why it will be of no use to any researcher. Then talking about this was about quantitative research. Talking about qualitative research, you will see that qualitative researchers actually give very little attention to reliability. Because whenever we talk about qualitative research, uh, it is the persona of the researcher, the background of the researcher, and it could be, the background could be anything, your caste profile, your gender, your class position, everything makes a massive impact. There is an overwhelming bearing of the researcher's presence in the field and what type of a researcher you are. So every new researcher would come up with perhaps different dimensions to the same problem. If you remember, when I was referring to the Jataka Katha of five blind men trying to make out how an elephant looks like, none of them were lying, isn't it? Were they lying? So it is not about taking up a positivist position where you are trying to settle between truthfulness of a fact or falsity of a fact. It is basically experience, the phenomenological aspect that we were discussing earlier. So it is something that emerges out of your experience. So as I told you, none of the five blind persons were lying, but they were trying to give some sort of information which was based on their own experience, since they did not have one faculty that was of vision. Similarly, as a researcher, you may not be in a position to cover all dimensions of it, but you will come up with some partial aspects of the same problem. And if I send another researcher to the same field, the same researcher would come up with some different dimensions that you might not have covered. So it really doesn't mean that reliability is not possible in qualitative research, or none of the results were matching, so none of the results could be said to be reliable. We actually cannot enter into these kind of arguments whenever we talk about this constructivist position in a qualitative research. So a qualitative research believe that methods they employ are radically different from quantitative methods, So the idea of reliability would also be different. We have to approach reliability, the idea of reliability, from a different context. In majority of the cases, they avoid the concept of reliability, instead use concepts like credibility, applicability, auditability. So qualitative researchers, they never talk about reliability. Instead they talk about, credibility about of something, because it is not possible for someone to, because you are interacting with people, you are trying to assess human behavior, their practices. So what you are capturing, it is, you are not a robot that you will capture the same thing what another individual is doing, because the way we sense the world, we perceive the world, a lot of our very, you know this idea of perceptions, they depend on where we were located. You remember when I was talking to you in the very first class, that you are trying to look out through your window, what you see is just one portion of a building that lies in front of your house. Now you go to your terrace and try to have the view. You will have a broader view. You could see that, okay, there is a playground near it, there is a huge mango tree at its right side. Now you go and try to assess it through the side door of your building. You will see a different view of the same thing. So basically, you are seeing it, trying to see the same thing through the window, from your terrace, from your, side door. You're trying to assess them through different means, but you're trying to look at the same thing. But in none of these cases, I can say that whatever you reported, it was untrue, or it was, we can say that, okay, it's, I cannot even say it was partial, because what you got, that was the best thing that you could have got, depending on your location, where you are located. Now you are located behind your window, so that is the reason why you got this kind of a vision. Now I would say that, okay, you are located on your terrace, that's the reason you could get an aerial kind of a view. So that depends where you are located. So as a social scientist, it also depends where you are located, where you are located socially, where you are located economically, where you are located politically, where you are located culturally, because that will frame your perception and vision of the field that you are looking at. You come from a economically strong or a weak background, what is your gender, what is, when I say that, what is your social location, basically I could mean your caste, your gender, your, the kind of positions you have. Suppose I am trying to interact with the lower class, a group which belongs to the lower caste, and you yourself, you belong to an upper caste. So your understanding of those practices have a different meaning for some other researcher who comes from the same lower caste. And it really doesn't mean that you were lying, or the other researcher who came from a lower class section, that person is lying. And suppose instead of a male researcher, I would send a woman researcher, she will come up with certain different dimensions that you um, as a male researcher might not have been able to cover. So that's the reason, we tend to avoid this term reliability in qualitative research. Instead, we talk about credibility of somebody's research, or how much applicable this kind of research is on this particular field, or auditability. I mean, how, if you tend to see that, okay, how appropriate these reports were. These are the things we tend to audit in on certain ways. So, in qualitative research, it is done by demarcating statements of the subjects and interpretations of the researchers, following procedures that would guarantee multiple researchers to produce comparable results. Got my point? You are demarcating the statements of the subjects, interpretation of the researcher, following the procedures, and you then tend to compare. You, as I told you are being transparent about everything. This is the method that I have used. These are my notes, field notes. This is the procedure of analysis. This is how I have analyzed things. And at the same time, it is important for you as a researcher to talk about yourself. That's an important aspect of research methodology when we talk about qualitative research, so that you enlighten your audience and your readers about your socio-economic political positions, the way you are being perceived by your respondents. So as I told you earlier, that in qualitative study, it is the presence of the researcher that has an overwhelming impact on the study itself. You send two different researchers belonging to two different socio-economic cultural profile, they will come up with different results, but it doesn't mean that with both these results the study is lacking reliability. No, not in any way. You have Flick, who has a robust scholarship on this particular issue. He proposes the following ways where reliability can be obtained in qualitative research. One is prolonged engagement and persistent observation. You have to spend quite a long amount of time in your field with your respondents when it comes to qualitative research, so that you can ensure that reliability has been maintained. That perhaps a quantitative researcher might not have to do, because somebody who is going out there with a survey questionnaire, they can just have these tick marks that okay, these are the things, these are the ways in which it needs to be done. That's just about a survey questionnaire. So perhaps a person need to just visit them once and spend some 15-20 minutes to complete the questionnaire. But in your case, if you are a qualitative researcher, maybe you have to be there for days together, so that you can see that what you are seeing is the right way of seeing, or the way you have recorded it's the appropriate thing to record. And the second way where you can maintain reliability is peer review. What the other researchers who have been working on the same field or on the same theme are talking about it. So, peer review is an important step to ensure reliability for qualitative researchers. Then, analysis of negative cases. Suppose I have a study and somebody else has a similar study in another society, and our results give completely opposite values. It's completely opposite. What I say, the other person denies, the other researcher denies the existence of such things. So I have to pick up those negative values and tend to understand that why that person got these results while I did not get, or why I couldn't arrive at these kind of conclusions. What was the cause behind it? What was the thing, those factors that affected this kind of outcome in that particular society, and while my observation or my findings came in these lines. So it is very pertinent that you need to analyze, give more importance to negative cases, cases which are on the same theme, perhaps on the in the related field, and the cases which are negative to yours, you have to analyze them more thoroughly. Then the other point is checking the appropriateness of the term of reference of interpretations and their assessment. So, what is the reference of interpretations? Like, how do I interpret things? As I told you, I have to be transparent about everything. I have to be, while I am interpreting, I have to talk about my position. Why do I hold these feelings? Why do I feel that these needs to be the interpretations? So I have to justify each and every statement of mine. So in that way, I can keep it open for my peer group to check the reliability of my instrument. Then the third one is members checking, that is communicative validation. As I was telling to you, you need to get your questionnaires, the accuracy of the data, uh, everything checked by your respondents, because you need to engage with them. You are trying to, you don't believe in creating a hierarchy between yourself and the people you are trying to study. It is not that you are trying to have an authority on them and you say that, okay, I'm out here to study you and this is what I feel about your society and this is how I have written and submitted my report. No, that's a very wrong way of doing that. You have to draw that validation from that group because you are talking about them. You cannot, exclude them from this entire process of research. So that's the reason why we need to seek communicative validity again and again in order to ensure reliability in qualitative studies. Then the next point is external auditing. You have to, refer it to some expert in the field, to the peer who would be, talking about or giving you similar ideas. You need to get it audited through some external expert or reviewer. So for internal validity, the following needs to be considered according to Drew believes that you use of low inference descriptors. You do not, as I told you, you don't arrive at a conclusion. You just keep everything open ended for the person, for the researcher to analyze. Then use multiple researchers whenever possible. You have to use, you have to send different researchers at different point of time to the same field, so that, even if I say that it's very very possible that you will not come up with the same result. The kind of reliability that we tend to talk about in quantitative studies, it will not be maintained in qualitative studies. But if I do so, I might be getting exposed to different dimensions of the same problem. So, most importantly, you need to maintain a detailed record of data that can be used by other scholars to check internal validity. So, again, in order to, because one of the most important things in qualitative research is trying to interpret things properly. So whenever you are trying to write something, it's better to quote them instead of give your interpretation or understanding of their words. Try to quote them, the way they have spoken, the kind of words they have used, quote everything. So the best way to do that is to have some kind of mechanical recording devices where possible. But where, you are trying to record certain sensible data and you feel that the researcher might not be comfortable doing that, abstain from that. But at the same time, you have to ensure that you get the exact thing that has been reported by the respondent. So that's the reason why, in order to ensure reliability, we, in qualitative research, we believe that it's better to quote things the way it is instead of, giving your own language to that particular interpretation. Then use participant researchers or informants to check accuracy. You think that, you have collected this much amount of data and this is your own understanding and interpretation of the data that you have collected. You get it audited by some key informants who belong to the same group, or certain participant researchers who have been to the same field, to check that accuracy, that okay, what I'm trying to see, am I seeing the right thing, have I gauged the entire scenario in an appropriate way. That I need to ensure every time. Then you have Drew, who proposes the 5 steps for external reliability. Specify the researcher's position or status so that the readers can be aware of the exact point of view that drives data collection. So you have to understand mostly the researcher's position. As I told you, you need to narrate your point of your local standing, where you stand. Now, I have to narrate that, I am a woman researcher who belongs to the upper caste, and this is my background, this is my educational background, this is my upbringing. My upbringing is all about this. This is where I belong to and I come from. And as a researcher, I am visiting this field where I find this kind of a community where this is the demographic profile of the people, this is the caste profile of the people, this is the language they use, this is the language I use. I am narrating everything transparently. I am keeping it open to the audiences. So here, as I told you, the researcher status should be made, informed to the readers, so that the reader are aware of the exact point of views that drives this kind of data collection. State the identity of the informants and how and why they were selected. Why did you choose this particular informant and why not somebody else? You have to justify the reason. I keep telling again and again that there is no wrong answer in sociology until and unless you are able to justify your stance. So you need to justify, why did I choose this person, what kind of procedure I used for choosing this person, and why, how I did it. You have to delineate everything very clearly. Then try to talk about the context or set boundaries and characteristics carefully, so that the reader can make judgments about similar situations and settings. So you need to ensure what you are covering, what you are not covering. You need to talk about the basic features of it and give a clear picture to the reader. Define the analytic constructs that can describe specific conceptual frameworks used in design and deductive analysis. Then specify data collection and analysis procedure. How you collected the data, with the what was the logic for picking up those methods of data collection, and then at the same time you have to talk about the procedure you followed to analyze the same data you collected. So I have here made a comparison between quantitative and qualitative studies, and it's been followed by Trochim and Donnelly. And they believe that when in quantitative studies they talk about internal validity, in qualitative research normally we talk about credibility instead of internal validity. When it comes to external validity, we talk about transferability, whether the same situation is applicable in any other case or not. In case of reliability, we talk about dependability. In case of objectivity, we talk about conformability. So this is actually the parallel that we tend to draw between reliability in quantitative research and reliability in qualitative research. So when I say credibility, what does credibility mean? I say that, if you remember, we use the word credibility for internal validity. So by credibility, it involves establishing the results of qualitative research that are credible from the perspective of the participant in the research. It is believed that the respondents are the best judge of whether or not the research findings have been able to reflect their opinions and feelings accurately. Credibility is synonymous with validity. So, the higher the agreement of respondents with your finding, the higher is the validity of the study. So, how credible your research is. So, your respondents will actually say that whether their problem has been properly being narrated or informed to the larger audience or not. So, your credibility has to come from the participants that you are studying. So, basically, I was talking to you the kind of colonial uh, bent of mind the first generation of researchers had, especially when we are talking about cultural anthropologists, because they used to look down upon those people. They had this kind of cult, what I say, a kind of bias, ethnocentric bias for their own position. That okay, oh, these are strange people, they eat these strange kind of herbs, or how could they eat these things, how could how stupid of them, how unethical of them to have these kind of cultural practices. That's an incorrect way of looking at things. You have to see things from their point of view, and that will add credibility to your study. So the next is transferability. It refers to the degree to which the results of qualitative research can be generalized and transferred to other settings. I have taken up this study in this particular setting. Is it applicable to some other setting? I have to see that whether it is generalizable or not. So that talks about your external validity. So instead of external validity, we talk about transferability here. Next is dependability. It concerns with whether we would obtain same results if we could observe the same thing twice. So you are observing the same thing twice, you are going to the same field again and again. So here qualitative research advocates flexibility and freedom. It may be difficult to establish it unless you keep an extensive and detailed record of the process for others to replicate to ascertain the level of dependability. And the next is, when I talk about objectivity, I'm actually talking about conformability. So what is conformability? In simple language, it refers to the degree to which the result could be confirmed and corroborated by other researchers. It is similar to reliability in quantitative studies. It is only possible if researchers follow the procedure in an identical manner for the results to be compared. In qualitative studies, as I told you, you may end up collecting different dimensions of the same problem. So it could not be said that your results are lacking reliability. So that's the reason why we use this word confirmability instead of reliability. So, what are the factors that would affect reliability? The wording of questions, the way you put forth your questions, the physical setting. Language is an important thing, and the physical setting where you are actually conducting your interview. Suppose I'm trying to conduct an interview on domestic violence, and I am trying to conduct it inside within the premises of the daughter-in-law who is actually a victim of domestic violence in her in-laws place. So the setting is actually a very wrong place to get the correct reliable result. Respondent's mood. If the respondent is not in a mood or not in a position to open up, you cannot force your questions. You will always get answers which are, you know, I may not say wrong, but which are not sufficient, which are inadequate. Interviews mood. Again, your own mood, because you may not have the same level of energy to strike the rapport every time. None of us have that. The nature of interaction. So the regression effect of instrument also has an way. If you remember, we had this retest method when we are talking about the different types of reliability. So you will conduct a same kind of a test through an instrument. That instrument could be a questionnaire, and again you will administer the same instrument with me after few days. I will get bored. So I will answer nonchalantly. Maybe if I had certain questions, I would say the opposite things in the second term. So that might affect reliability as well. Criteria of reliability and validity. As I told you, validity is about accuracy of an instrument, the precise precision of an instrument, and reliability is the very idea of getting consecutive results again and again through the same instrument. And you might get incorrect result, but if you are getting it consecutively for many number of times, it is considered to be a case of reliability, but it is not considered to be valid. you have to keep in mind every time. And without validity, reliability is completely useless. So when you are testing the quality of an indicators, you are also testing it when so that you can get reliable results. In validity, you are measuring relevance, precision, accuracy. But in reliability, what you are trying to measure, you are measuring objectivity, stability, consistency, and precision as well. In validity, you are testing the ability to produce findings that are in agreement with your theoretical and conceptual values. But here, you are hellbound on getting the same result every time. So that is how you are restricting yourself to. You are not bothered it is right or wrong, but you should get the same result every time. And it is only, this kind of a narration is only valid for quantitative studies and not qualitative studies. That you have to keep in mind. Then in validity, you ask whether the instrument is measuring what it is supposed to measure. As I told you, you are not using a barometer to measure temperature. You have to use the correct instrument. In scientific research, I mean natural sciences, they have already pre-designed instruments. But your basic challenge is you have to create your own instrument every time you land on the field. So that's the reason you will have this confusion whether you are putting forth the right question for the right problem or not. So you have to ensure whether your instrument is measuring what it is supposed to measure. That is about validity. And when it comes to reliability, you have to say, does the instrument produce the same result every time I land up in the field? As I told you, my weighing machine gives the wrong result. So I will take the record reading 5 times a day. It will give me the same result, but the result is inaccurate. So my study is reliable, but it is not valid. So it is of no use. So most important is your study has to have validity, which will be followed by reliability and not the other way around. That you have to keep in mind. So validity, as I told you, validity and reliability, they are actually, quality measures of your research instrument, and your research instrument are your tools. It could be a questionnaire, it could be a schedule, it could be a guide. So you have to always see that first validity is obtained before you think of reliability. So any questions? I think we'll stop here today, and maybe in the next class I will try to discuss the relationship between uh, theory, concepts, and facts, and that then we will tend to relate it with the idea of hypothesis. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.